Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast with Benji Naesen, our first World Tour level stage race in Europe for the season, Paris-Nice, stage 1 of 8. You might have seen my preview before. Benji's been flat out with work all week. We then had Strade yesterday. Thank you for all the support on the Strade podcast yesterday. That's crazy. But the profile for this first stage, an interesting one. Not a basic, straightforward sprint stage. From Saint-Cyr-le-Col to Saint-Cyr-le-Col, they do 2 laps, about 85 k's each, for a 166k stage. And it's like, I call it a Britannia Classic light stage. Lots of up and down climbs of like 400 meters at 8%, 1200 meters at 5.3%, 700 meters at 7.1%, the Côte de Méridon. Intermediate sprint points at the top of those punchy climbs. I think the Chateau Fort climb. So Matthews and Teish Benoit were going for those sprint points today. And then the finish was 500 meters of like false flat uphill in the last K, in the first 500 meters of the last K. And it was a little bit uphill before then. And then 3 to 4% drag in the last 500 meters. So got to be careful not to go too early. So an interesting parcours, not a straightforward sprint stage, which is what I like about it. Before we get into some of the riders here, the sprinters for today, I want to mention our show partner, Lecol. You already know about them, www.lecol. Well, I mentioned on the Strade pod, I think yesterday or the day before, there was a 10% deal for first-time buyers. Well, I think there's a day left on this. I don't know when the weekend finishes in Europe. You're obviously behind Australia. But for the rest of the weekend, there's 20% off the pro bundles on the Lecol website, which is a pretty good deal. And there's the Strava Club as well, which you can go and check out, where there's constant deals throughout the year through the Strava Club, where if you do a certain number of Ks or a challenge, you unlock a discount code, which you can apply in the Lecol store. So go and check them out at the link below to support the podcast. But Benji, run us through who are the sprint candidates for today's stage, because it was so many.
Yeah, a lot of names at the start here. I think that from the big guns, we know that in the UAE Tour, we spoke about the 2 best sprinters in the world, Caleb Ewan and Sam Bennett. Now, Caleb Ewan was not here, so Sam Bennett was obviously one of the favorites for the sprints. We also had Demar here from last year's, one of the best sprinters of last year. We spoke about that as well in the UAE Tour. Ackermann also here. He's got a different lead out though on this time, because Jordi Meijers is now leading him out instead of the lead out we saw at the UAE Tour. But yeah, we'll see if that changed anything. Nizzolo was here, but his lead out Peluki didn't seem to have the best day of his life. Those are definitely one of the big numbers. Case Ball as well. Jumbo Visma is not here with a sprinter. They're focusing all out for GC, like you mentioned in the preview. Mess Pedersen here for the sprints. We've got Nasser Bouhanni, and I think those are the biggest names I can really name. Matthews, perhaps, but yeah, we'll go into that in a second. Christoph, also a name I'd like to name, and I dare to say that's the end, perhaps Philipsen as well. So who did you have your eye on if you saw the profile? Who did you think was going to win this first stage?
I thought it was possible, but I'm very, very unlikely that a Magnus Cort, Michael Matthews style rider would win. I think it just wasn't quite difficult enough, this finish, or long enough. 500 meters at 4%, that's still going to be fine for Demar and Sam Bennett. I thought Quickstep might send Cataneo late. That didn't eventuate, but it was a pretty sleepy stage, to be honest, at least the first half of it until the last 50 Ks. Who was it in the breakaway, Benji? It was Fabien Dubé, the French rider for Team Total Direct Energy. So when it's one rider in a breakaway on not as strong a team, not on a World Tour team, the peloton just chills out. So they did the first circuit around Saint-Cyr-le-Col. It was pretty chilled. People were relaxed. And then it was 50 Ks in, Benji, that Philippe Gilbert attacked just randomly. And who was on his wheel? I couldn't pick out who. He brought a Lotto Soudal rider with him.
Yep, Stefano Oldani. We saw him a few weeks ago as well, and I think he worked in that stage race Bessèges that Wellens won, a lot for Wellens in that breakaway. He was seen as a sprinter early on in his career, but seems to veer off into climbing as well now. Pretty overall all-round rider. Pretty good domestique, and I think he can do well in a breakaway as well in the future. But all in all, this attack with Gilbert, Oldani, Lawless, and I think 2 other people didn't really end up doing too much. They caught Duby, and eventually this group was taken back once the peloton started speeding up slowly but surely again. But there was another like move quite similar a few minutes later, not too far from the finish line. I think then 30 kilometers or 35 kilometers from the finish line, we had a move with Søren Andersen, Turns, Cataneo, De La Cruz, Latour, Gauthier, Baragli. And the thing about this move is this has quite a few names that are in teams of sprinters. Søren Andersen for Kees Bol's team, Turns for Mes Pedersen, Cataneo for Bennett. So those teams are not going to actually do the chasing. It was all down to
Well, I
Buhani's
don't know
squad.
about that.
Yeah, tell me.
I think those guys were kind of confused in that break. I think some of them they'd pull. Who I don't know who the UAE rider was. They'd pull and then they would sit in for a bit. Turns was definitely there to block and to sit in that group, and I think Cataneo was too. But I feel like the Alpecin didn't know what they were doing with Benji. Like I saw the Alpecin guy pulling a bit. I then saw when a break went up the road with the FDJ trains and Quickstep trains there, Alpecin pulling again. And I was like, but they've got Philipsen. So what's their plan for today? I was kind of confused by that. So who was chasing that large group? Because it was a nice move for Quickstep and Trek Segafredo.
It was Buhani's team. Arqueta was doing it. And eventually that slowly but surely came back as the front group was a bit confused. They didn't do too much. Søren Andersen tried with a solo move on the left side of the road, but was an instant reaction by, I think, one of those riders. I don't know which one it was, to be honest, by heart. But all in all, that move came back. But unfortunately for you and the entire oceanic region of the Earth, there was one rider in the peloton
Cycling fans globally.
Yeah, cycling fans globally weren't cheering this time around when Richie Porte hit the deck. And I don't know what the reason was, but he was a sole rider that hit the deck, so I don't know what the reason was. Perhaps he got a little budge and then he was on the ground, or he personally made a mistake. We don't know. We can't really speak about it, but it looked first like he was standing up. Dennis was waiting for him, crept on the bike, and it looked like he was getting off quite easily again. And like a few minutes later, he stepped off the bike again, and it looked to be was it feeling his hip or his knee? I don't know what it was.
No,
but...
I thought he was done. I thought he was done straight away.
Yeah.
The minute I saw the crash, the way he was like hunched over and hobbled, and he's like these GC guys are so skinny, and when they hit their hip, they're fragile. They can't pedal. Like, and yeah, I don't know what happened, and I hope he's okay. I hope it doesn't affect the rest of his season. You've got to say, the peloton was just starting to accelerate. I think they were starting to, and maybe in the last 30Ks, start to focus on the finish and the intermediate sprint. We didn't see exactly what happened, but it just keeps happening for him and throughout his career, and it can't just be bad luck. Maybe it is, but yeah, I think it's just really unlucky for him, and in this instance maybe, but positioning wise, Ineos had Gegenhardt at the front a lot more, and Porte was at the back. We hadn't seen him for ages throughout the stage, which was kind of unusual. I thought they'd have him right at the front with Gegenhardt rather than having him split behind with Dennis and co. So I don't know what happened, and maybe we'll hear further about it. But it's not like, hopefully he's not, sometimes these low-speed crashes, if it was at the back, everyone was braking, and he's just the last to brake, and you fall on your hip, they can be quite bad, even if it's at 20, 25 Ks an hour rather than a high-speed crash. They can still be bad, so I'll be waiting to see.
I fell at 5K an hour and broke my elbow 2 years ago. So
yeah, exactly.
A low-speed crash can be worse.
Yeah, so that's a shame, but yeah, just seems bad luck or crashes just seem to continually follow Porte around. So Gegenhardt, it seems, is their main GC focus now, Ineos. It's a big dash to their GC ambitions, losing Porte, whether he was going to be a helper or a co-leader with Gegenhardt.
Yeah.
But yeah, this finish, Benji, got this intermediate sprint at Chateau 4. Michael Matthews had taken second in the intermediate sprint, the first one on the first circuit. It really started to heat up with Durbridge putting on the pace in those rolling climbs before that intermediate sprint. If you go and look at the profile, it's up and down, pretty much all the way into this finish. It's not an easy finish. And then why do you think Orica or Bike Exchange were going for the intermediate sprint points, Benji? Were they trying to get Matthews bonus seconds to get yellow today? Are they going for the points jersey? Are they hoping he has a good TT on Tuesday? Why are they pursuing it?
Well, actually, I didn't know while it was happening. So the first thing I did when I saw it was I looked up the profile of the rest of the stage of Paris because I so didn't do research beforehand. Didn't watch your preview fully. Oops, my bad.
You. I mentioned the location of every single intermediate sprint point in the 8 stages on the preview.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I should have been there for you. But
So yeah, how dare you
uh,
have a job?
I was looking into it, and it really didn't look like it would be anything GC related. Perhaps in the first 3 days, take the leader jersey after 3 or so days, but after that, it's gone fully for him. Point classification, it's Paris-Nice. Come on, like perhaps he cares about it, but I don't think it's the main goal of Matthews, the point classification at Paris-Nice. So I don't know. I can't tell you what the reason is. Can you?
I think he's going. I think he's going for the leader's jersey, getting it either today or after the TT because he can do a good short
Yep.
ITT. Tej Benoit is actually going for the bonus seconds for GC. I'm pretty sure was his reason for doing that.
Yep.
Or maybe, yeah, who knows? But that was the intermediate sprint. Matthews didn't continue on with it. There was kind of they put a lot of pressure on the peloton going really hard up that intermediate sprint. We had 16 Ks to go from that point, and that putting the pressure on instigated a lot of attacks afterwards. Matthews did sit up. He seemed actually kind of tired, and I thought that didn't bode well for his final sprint. And then, yeah, there were big attacks. And eventually they were all brought back. Benji's already mentioned them. We've kind of done it in the wrong order. Doesn't matter. Because this was coming down to a bunch sprint, regardless of all the mischief beforehand and the crashes. It was just an interesting way to get to a bunch sprint, which is what I liked about this stage design. Even though we got there, it was not boring along the way. So we're getting into the final drag. FDJ have been dominant all day. They were on the right-hand side. Israel Startup Nation start moving up, Benji, with Zabel leading out for Greipel, I think. Zabel's his last man. Arkea Samzik were there. Bora Hansgrohe didn't really have a complete train, or they weren't dominating the front. Trek were dominating the front for a fair while, but kind of went missing a little bit in the last 2.5 kilometers. Jumbo Visma kept Roglic relatively safe until the last 3 kilometers. But quick step, Benji, what do you think their plan was? Was it standard, let FDJ burn themselves early with Scottson on the front, third last man, way too early at 1800, and then come up late? Do you think that was Quickstep's plan?
I don't know. I got a bit scary for them during the sprint because, like, in the last 5 kilometers, they were not really up there in the first 25 positions, and we saw
Yeah.
Merku and Bennett on opposite sides of the roads at certain points. And it was only in the last like 3 kilometers where I saw Merku and Bennett coming together with each other, and then slowly but surely move up in the peloton. And I think if Merku wasn't there to bring Bennett to the front, he would not have been in a position to sprint even today. But yeah, we had a crash as well, which then forced Koenig Quickstep to have solely Bennett there because I don't know who crashed, but somebody crashed very, very close to the front of the peloton. I think 10th or 11th position, and that caused Merku to have to brake like extremely fast. He was in a standstill, and obviously he couldn't really do much in the last kilometer then for Bennett. So that's really the Koenig situation here. But one thing I want to also dive into is DSM because I found it so weird how they have an 7-man train, I think it is these
It's what
days.
they do. We
Yeah,
were
but
talking about it live, me and you on Discord.
yeah, it
They
ruins
did the
them.
same thing at the tour last year.
Like in the tour, it did work because like there was no like for some reason in the tour it worked because it got them to the front a lot of the
Sort of
times.
worked.
Sort of worked. Yeah, they didn't get the victory, so yeah, not really ideal. But right here, they were on the right side of the road in the peloton, and the road narrowed. So if you're like with 8 people and the road narrows, 7 people again, then you're gonna have to move to the left. But obviously, there's not enough space if there's like 4 trains next to each other. So your riders have like a few spaces in between then. And at that point, the case ball is like 75% into the peloton. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Then you need to come back through the riders that you're stuck behind right now with every single one of those riders to move to the front. And at a certain point, I think they used the opposite side of the road to try and fix that, which kind of worked. But yeah, it's not handy. Let's end it with that. But what team do you think was the strongest when it comes to the lead out in the last section?
None of them really. So what happened was FDJ were on the front too early. I knew with 1800 when they just had Scots in there, and then I was doing the quick maths, and I thought, well, if Scotson's here with 1800 and he was already kind of blowing, then I don't know where Guarnieri's going to be. That crash may have disrupted things. I can't see Christoph in the finish list anywhere, nor Case Bowl. So I think Case Bowl and him were out of position. But yeah, Damar was second wheel. We're into the last 600 meters. His last lead out man's already kicking. Remembering this is an uphill drag, so you want to be going with 100 to go at the earliest. I think if you want to win this stage coming out of a wheel, not going with 200 to go, then you got no chance. So yeah, Damar he was there. His lead out man kind of went missing. Then Bora moved up. Alpes and Phoenix were nowhere for Philipsen, which was super weird. I thought they'd burn guys too early, getting in breaks, etc. Bora Hansgrohe had a much better lead out, I thought, for Pascal Ackermann today was it Jordi Meus, I think,
Yep.
today for Ackermann. He's leading Ackermann out. Damar is trying to follow his lead out man, and he's like second wheel. Ackermann's fourth wheel, and Pedersen is coming up the inside. Sturven, I think Benji's trying to bring Pedersen up the inside because a slightly right-hand bending finish. So Sturven's kind of bringing Pedersen up a dead end because when FDJ's lead-out man finishes his pull, he's going to just stop on the barriers, and then everyone's going to be sprinting to the left of him. But Sturven's trying to sprint into that space. And so Damar just boxed in Sturven's second wheel. Mads Pedersen was then boxed in by literally every sprinter in this race. Oh, he's got the barrier on his right, Cockard, Bennett to his left. He's got nowhere to go. Damar starts sprinting pretty early, following Jordi Meus and Ackermann, who've moved up to his left-hand side in the open space in this curving finish. Bennett then follows Ackermann. Cockard was trying to fight for the wheel of Ackermann or Damar, I think. Bennett takes that wheel off Ackermann. Or Damar's, takes that wheel off Ackermann,
Yep.
and then starts sprinting to Ackermann's left pretty late. Damar had already been sprinting on the inside because his lead-out man had dropped him off way too early, and he was clearly like going a different speed to Bennett. Pedersen got boxed in behind Damar and could only open up when the barriers opened up really late in the last 50 to 75 and couldn't really get going and get a good run of it. And Bennett on the hoods, not a good lead out today, did it all himself, absolutely smoked everybody, like different level. And I said it on the preview, he is the best bunch sprinter out of these guys. And if you want to beat him on a stage like today, you got to make it hard for 4 hours, not just 30 minutes.
I think that there were a few riders that kept barging each other. I think Damar lost quite a bit of his speed when he started shouldering a Trek rider. I think the lead out of Trek at that point. Stuyven. He lost quite a bit of speed there, and I think that instigated already that he had to put that extra mile into actually launching from a much lower speed than the rest. And I think on the opposite side of the road, Kokar was doing the same to someone else.
Bennett. Cockard was ducking in, trying to get Ackermann's wheel off Bennett, I think, and Bennett was like, nah.
I think it was. I think I'm talking about a different situation, but I can't go into it because I don't remember it fully. But either way, we spoke about it at the UAE Tour. We explained how Bennett and Ewan are the best sprinters in the world, and the situation of the race makes one more consistent than the other, and the fact that Bennett has Merku makes Bennett have the best position for a sprint more consistently than the likes of a Ewan. But that also goes in comparison to everybody else. But today, Merku did bring him to the front, but the entire last kilometer was basically Bennett having to worm himself into a good position there. And I think he chose the right wheel this time. He chose Ackermann. Ackermann was basically dying in the wheel of Jordi Meus, genuinely. He didn't have anything left, and perhaps they should switch it around. Jordi Meus for the sprint. Belgium would like it.
What was the sprint where Ackermann... I think it was the ITV video, Benji, I did on Paris Stage 2 last year where Schachman and Sagan got in, they caused the echelons, and then they brought Ackerman with them, and then they rode the finals for Ackerman instead of Sagan, who was like on. Sagan was on good form before lockdown. He was like flying, okay, and they rode for Ackerman in the finish, and Sagan leads him out, and then gets out of the saddle for 4 seconds, and then has to sit down, and then Nizzolo won, and it was similar today. It seems like it's either he's jumping way too early, the lead out's not working, or then the lead out, you got to say, for Jordi Meus was fine. I thought
Yep,
it's better
certainly.
than before, and he just couldn't get out of the saddle. So maybe the fitness isn't quite there on a harder stage than expected, and it kind of reminded me of that UAE Tour sprint, Benji, where Murku led Bennett out really well. I think it was stage 4 where they had the bend, and Bennett just picked the right side of the road. He picked with the curve. He picked
Yep.
the open side to the left, kept that side open for himself, and you know, it's not about just having the best legs. Maybe Pedersen would have been super quick on this finish, but he got blocked for like 100 meters of the last 200. So you're not going to win from that position. And had to stop and start a sprint and soft pedal a few times. So good positioning from Bennett, good heads up sprinting, and he's also way better than these guys. I'll just read out the results for completeness for everybody. Sam Bennett first, Arnaud Demar second. I thought Pedersen was going to pip him on the line, actually. Pedersen third, Philipsen fourth, Cockard fifth. Still quite nice from Cockard, actually. Ackerman sixth, Bauhaus seventh, Christophe Laporte eighth. Maybe it was Laporte that was doing the argy-bargy with Cockard, Benji. Greipel ninth, ahead of Rudy Barbier, his teammate 10th. They got to change that up.
Yeah.
Anthony Turgis 11th, Degenkolb 12th, Damien Touze 13th. And then apparently Roglic and co were caught behind that crash and lost time on paper, but that's going to get rearranged with the 3-kilometer crash rule. So I don't think any of the GC contenders will have lost time today, apart from obviously Porte's abandonment. Israel Benji, you think it's been nice letting, it's like when the Boston Celtics in the first possession of the game in like 2008 would put Kendrick Perkins in the post and let him shoot, so he'd have a chance at touching the ball on offense, and then he'd be happy for the rest of the game. Have Israel Startup Nation given Greipel enough chances so far this season? Now it's time to be like, okay, come on, we've got to try something else, someone younger, someone that actually can be third or second.
The thing is, for the sprint, Zabel was the lead out ahead of Greipel, and Barbier was in the wheel of Greipel before the sprint started. So
Really?
it looks like they just both sprinted, which is basically doing a Wanty in the Grand Tour, because Wanty kept doing that a few years ago, if I recall correctly. But
Well,
yeah.
Israel did that too at San Juan, didn't
Yeah,
they?
it feels like it right now, because Rudy Barbier has done some pretty good sprints last year at San Juan, but right now, he sprinted from the wheel from Greipel. But if positioning is so great and you're in the wheel of Greipel, a rider that has issues staying in the right position these days, just energy wise, it seems, then you're not going to make it to a good position to sprint. So Barbier should not be following Greipel if that was the case, because I'm just going off what I remember of the race right now on that aspect.
Yeah, it's pretty weird because I actually think Israel Startup Nation's lead out train is really good. It's actually really good, Benji. Like for the guys they've got on the team, they present right at the front of these races, and yeah, I think they've got to try something different. I mean, Greipel ninth. I mean, no, it's not that good, is it? Like, like I was gonna, it's all right, but
Oh,
I
Cavendish
don't
got
think.
second today. We can't
Yeah,
really
exactly,
celebrate a 9 by Greipel.
exactly, yeah. So, yeah, I think that's something to look at, and I think they should try and change it up because I do think they got people who can. I think Rudy Barbier might not be as consistent, like he just might not get the top tens, but I think he can randomly get like a top 3 on a
Yeah.
sprint stage out of nowhere. So I think that's better to shoot for, and is better for morale than what's happening currently. Anything else from this stage, Benji? You like the parcours, like the design? I think it was quite an interesting sprint stage, given that there were bonus seconds on offer for certain riders, and it wasn't just a straightforward sprint.
Yep, I think we'll just in general see Lotto Sudal take on a bit of a different role than we usually expect in sprint stages, because Ewan is not here, so Gilbert attacking, Oldani attacking, that's the stuff we'll see, and I think they might keep doing that for the next couple of days.
Stage 2 tomorrow, as Benji said, it looks to be a sprint stage on paper. It will be a sprint stage on paper because the weather is not supposed to be too windy. Envilt-sur-Monsier to Amélie, 188 Ks, pretty much flat, and the finish is flat, but for a little riser in the last 3-4 Ks, it shouldn't bother people too much. So yeah, I agree with Benji there, and that's pretty much all for today. I'm worried about John Degenkolb. He's not looking too good, and I think back in the day he would have been going well on a finish such as this. But yeah, Father Time is coming to everybody, and it's a new era.
That's a dark tone.
I know. I've just felt sad about Port and then Gilbert's attack and Lotto Soudal. And it's like back in the day. Think about it, Benji. If this was 2015, I don't know why this is such a long Degenkolb point. 2015, you'd be like, Gilbert, oh, you got to watch him on the last intermediate sprint climb. Everyone's got to take that really seriously. Now everyone's like, oh, isn't it nice that Gilbert's out in front for once? And then in the finish, everyone would be like, oh, uphill drag like this, John Degenkolb on a up and down stage, you got to watch out. And it's like, I don't know. But I hope he gets there. And maybe they're just focused on the cobble stuff. But yeah, I'm being too dark. And Benji, he wants to go and watch GP Industria highlights, I think, and I do too. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks to Lakov for supporting the podcast. Ciao.